was a drive way back. It might be. It could be. It is. Holy cow. Welcome to another broadcast of Bricks Behind the Ivy. Holy cow.
Hey, Cub fans. Welcome to another episode of Bricks Behind the Ivy. I am your hostess, the mostest, Jeff Candid Cubs Rogowskis, and joining me is the greatest Harry Carey impersonator in the entire world, Mr. Patrick Erickson. Pat, how you doing today?
Hey, buddy, what's going on? Harry left some beer down here at the bar, so I figured I'd partake while we have a little chat.
Yeah, what a nice treat for you. I'm sitting here drinking,
Oh, yes.
the roots of beers with zero sugar.
There you go.
So I'm partially partaking in a much lamer way.
That's all right.
Yeah, how have you been keeping yourself busy with, unfortunately, our favorite baseball team sitting at home while other teams continue to get to play?
Well, I have been watching a little bit of playoff baseball. Shocked at our modern-day Moneyball situation going Detroit, where you have a team payroll of about $18.5 million, and they're doing what they're doing. That's pretty good to see. I've been watching the Kansas City Royals. Have been doing good. Just kind of seeing, that and seeing what some of our former guys are doing with Schwarber, although came up on the short end of the stick last night, and seeing what Baez is doing and everything. But just doing that. I got a ticker back here at the bar as far as how many days to spring training already, and hoping and keeping my fingers crossed about our Blackhawks this year. So we'll see.
Yeah, if you missed last week's episode, I did a quick ranking of the playoff teams that were left to see if, as a Cub fan, you were undecided, looking at ex-Cubs and futility index of how long it's been since they've won rings or pennants. And the Tigers are at the top of that list. And I've got one of my best friends from college is from the Detroit area and a big Tigers fan. So go Tigers. I definitely rooting.
There you go.
My roommate from college, when the Tigers got hot, put some money on them to win the World Series because the odds were insane. So I want my buddy to win a bunch of money. So
that's a good payday right there. Absolutely.
Go Tigers. They're a really fun story. And as I mentioned, I
really didn't. Yeah, go ahead.
I have such an affinity to Little Caesars. Like, I grew up eating that pizza and
pizza.
Yeah, their home run pizza spike. It cracks me up every time I see it. They've got the Little Caesars pizza. It's like every time. Well, since the Cubs season is over and we have to sit here and talk about, I guess, the postmortem. This is an episode that I've wanted to do and talk about, how we feel, giving some letter grades, looking back at BPTI past. Maybe I'll do a little quick montage now.
In hindsight, we should have curbed our enthusiasm.
The idea that they're not great at anything, I think, is a solid thing for reducing the likelihood of this team completely falling off the wagon. They're a very solid team in a division that no one took ownership of. So on the 83.5, I'm going to take the over, and I think that there is opportunity to address the rosters on the edges. I am worried that they will continue to operate as that first CBT threshold as being a hard cap and will not take on salary at the trade deadline, which just is unacceptable. If you're competing for this division, that is a complete.
You pay up.
Yeah, that is a non-starter. You are a large market club. I don't want to hear it. That is not an acceptable answer.
What Jed and the front office, I'm going to put Carter in this as well, is what they're doing by putting this opening day lineup is they feel like they've done enough to make it to the playoffs. By the Cubs not making it to the playoffs this year, I feel like that's saying what you did not work. It did not work. You did not spend money that you have to make this roster better.
Overall, I'm going to give this Cubs team a C-. And the only reason that they're that high is because they are still within reach of a wild card spot, which the goal is to get in. Should they have done more this offseason? Probably. Should they have addressed this roster in different ways, used money? Should we be having conversation about how they're using the CBT? Yep, probably. But I think we're going to have those conversations in the offseason.
Maybe next year.
So let's kind of put some structure onto this. We'll kind of go back and forth. We're going to rank starting pitching, relief pitching, offense and defense, and then an overall season grade. So I think we're going to start with, one of the positives. And to me, that's some of the starting pitching. But speaking of positives, I do want to give a shout out to one of our longest sponsors, Wrigleyville Sports, the greatest. Yeah, bell ring. The people at Wrigleyville Sports get their wings. Wrigleyville Sports is located on the corner across the street from Wrigley Field. They have the best selection of Chicago sports memorabilia. It's no longer baseball season, so if you need your Caleb Williams jersey, he's heating up and the Bears are looking a little bit better. If you need that Connor Bedard jersey or sweater so that you can be ready to go to the United Center and cheer on a young Blackhawks team, then pick that up from Wrigleyville Sports. Use our promo code IV10 and that'll get you 10% off at checkout. And thank you so much, Wrigleyville Sports, for continuing to be such an amazing sponsor. But starting pitching, let's talk about the starting pitching. I would say that in a lot of ways that you could say the starting pitching was the strength of this team this year. It was the strength last year, in which they got some depth from some guys. Some injuries got them off to a slow start, and then injuries kind of affected their depth. So, Pat, what do you think the highs and lows of the starting pitching is this year, and what would you give them letter grade wise?
Well, okay. Let's first start off with the bad news. I think the bad news is depth. I think that the organization as a whole was relying too much on the fact that if somebody was struggling or any of those situations or scenarios would come about, that, we've got depth. Well, we out that the depth really wasn't all there. I mean, you had Ben Brown and hurt. You had Jordan Wade and hurt. So we had to have a lot of our guys go out there and just kind of pitch through whatever that they were working on, etc. And then Steele ended up going down. That really affected the ball too. But I think that's the one thing that I kind of focused on the most. It was unfortunate to see your favorite and one of my favorites, Kyle Hendricks. He had, such a roller coaster of a season. But, in the end, he did end up finishing strong. But that's what I would say. As far as the good is concerned, I would, you look at top of our rotation right now with Shota. I mean, that he is worth every penny that we paid him. I mean, he has come through in the clutch. He has adopted this city like no other. I even saw him at the Bears game last weekend for photos. He is basically anytime they gave him the ball, say, hey, go do this, and he would do it, and he would come through in flying colors. Tyon had one heck of a great year. Struggled occasionally, but But the good thing with all that is that if you look at our statistics right now, I'm kind of looking at them right here. Justin Steele ended up with a 3.07 ERA, which is great. But you know what? We didn't have to rely on just him saying, okay, well, every fifth day we got a good win. We had the rotation that we need. And I would like to see, hopefully, that the organization comes around and maybe gets that other arm. But that's for another day. But that's what so as far as an overall grade, I would probably give them a B.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Just to kind of put some context to the numbers, they had a 3.80 group ERA as a starting pitching staff, which actually puts them in the middle, which shocks me. They're 16th in baseball this past season. They had some really strong performances, like Shodi Managa was a revelation. Like he is, he was so good, and I think he is possibly, if you're naming awards for this team, the MVP of the 2024 Cubs.
Hands down.
I remember we had talked about he ended up getting 2 more wins, but we're like the quietest 13-3 that we had ever seen. And it was 15-3 in his first season with an under 3 ERA. But yeah, I think, it's definitely interesting the Cubs continue to do a thing that I think is just not very sustainable for how the game is played. You know, their rotation had a strikeout rate of about 21%, which is actually about a full percent below the major league average of 22%. So they just don't have like high-end strikeout type stuff coming from their rotation. And we could argue that they didn't have a lot of that really in their bullpen until later in the season with the emergency of, which we'll talk about the bullpen in a second. But yeah, for how strong the performances were from like Justin Steele and a really, really nice solid season from Jamison Tyone and Shota Imanaga, yeah, that depth really reared its head and like kind of brought the entire group down because they were, you know, kind of filling gaps and, you know, spot starting guys. And, you know, like Javier Assad was, you know, very commendable this year.
Yeah.
Like when he was good, he was very good, but sometimes, you know, those walks would creep up. But yeah, this pitching staff, similar to what we said at the beginning of the year, is missing like a true front end, like strikeout, like shut him down guy. Like Imanaga and Tyone would be, or Imanaga and Steele would be incredible 2 and 3s if they could see at the top. But yeah, they're just still missing that one piece. But yeah, I would give them. I'd probably lean towards like a C plus. Just because of like how the depth really affected them this year. Maybe that's a little too negative. But yeah, like the strong performances really lift that grade. But
No.
I'd like to see more strikeouts. Like that is a definite concern of mine going into, and that's something that Jed's going to have to look at this offseason. So
yeah, absolutely.
With that being said, that's our starting pitching group. Relief pitching. I think I'll start on this one that just kind of adds some context to.
Ooh.
You know, I feel like this is going to be probably one of the lowest grades. I will give the Cubs credit where credit's due. They have figured out the bullpen the last 2 seasons as the years went on. The problem has been the group they start with. They just, and that has derailed both seasons. This year it was no Julian Merriweather because he was hurt, leaning on Adbert Alzolay, who ended up having an injury, and him being a non-effective closer, riding Hector Neris into the ground as a non-effective closer. The Cubs blew 30 saves this year. 30.
Yeah.
That's just, you can't do that. And, you know, I think at the end of the day, like when you're looking at, you know, some of the blown saves leaders, the Red Sox had 39, the Diamondbacks had 39, and the Diamondbacks ended up, you know, just missing the playoffs, so that was a huge component to them missing the playoffs. And the other teams on the top of this list were the Miami Marlins and the White Sox. So you're in the group of the worst records, except for the Diamondbacks, in baseball this year.
Yeah.
Still won 83 games. Like, your bullpen is killing you. And you know, but like the positives, I'm going to go with the positives. Glass half full. I think Porter Hodge really emerged as a late inning weapon, maybe our closer. Like, but I would like to go into next season having him be a late inning weapon and assign someone better than him, so he's just another part. Because as we learned with Keegan Thompson and the name's escaping me. I think it was like 22 going into 2023. We're like, oh, Keegan Thompson, he's gonna shut things down. Like, he's such a key part of this bullpen. Like, this is great. Like, we don't have to think about anything else. And then he just fell off. He just was not the same guy. Like, you can't guarantee with some of these young players, development's not linear. Like, go get guys that have proven stats and have these guys be like extra bonus stuff. Like,
absolutely.
So if I'm gonna, on that basis, and I'm gonna give the bullpen an F. I cannot, like, that. They sunk the team. It just, there's no other way to sugarcoat it.
Yep. Oh, and kind of piggyback what you were saying, I couldn't have said it better. This bullpen gave me fits all year. They had lack of depth. You know, you said they had 30 blown saves, and I don't have the stat currently in front of me, but I would also love to see how many one-run ball games this year. And a lot of that because of the fact of, you know, they couldn't hold the lead or whatever the case might be. You also had a lot of injuries, a lot of, we'll just throw this here. It almost seemed like, and maybe I'm wrong, but it almost like he'd have a roster and they would just throw something against the wall, see what it sticks. And okay, go ahead. It's like they had a list of all the names in a dartboard and just throw a dart and see, okay, this guy's throwing today. I mean, it was just, it was terrible. I mean, and like you said, I think Porter Hodge, I think he was one of the bright spots that did indeed come out of that this year. And I look forward to seeing what he's going to bring in 25. But, you know, and I think the other biggest thing that was just a glaring notice is we have no closer. We were doing whole, and they've done this in years past, time and time again, the closer by committee. And you know what? That might have worked years or decades ago. That does not work anymore. Now, that doesn't always guarantee success, as you can see in the, you know, what's been going on in the playoffs. But you need to have a bona fide starter that's going to, or excuse me, a reliever, a closer that'll go in there that you can pretty much guarantee 90% of the time that this guy's going to go in there and this guy's going to mow him down, shut him down, or even, you know, ground ball pitcher like a Maddox type where he's just, you know, making them hit soft grounders or whatnot. But they that, and that should be maybe priority 1 or priority 1A, you know, next to the offense that Jed needs to seriously look at coming up. You know, now I know that there were rumors about the Mason Millers and, you know, out in Oakland or now I guess Vegas, but you know, winning a trade for that. But, you know, I don't care who the heck it is. It just has to improve. And if there was a letter below, I'd give it to him. But yeah, I'd give him an F.
G.
Yeah, bingo. There you go. Absolutely.
Yeah, and just like pigtailing on you know, one of the things you said, the Cubs played 56 one-run games in 2024, which in like, this is a perfect transition, can be an indictment of how the offense is constructed as well. Like, they just did not score enough runs in order to, you know, win baseball games. And that's like the bullpen. Yes, they had 30 plus saves, and like a lot of those are probably, but like then we're talking, that's a lot of one-run games. Future note, you know, team that just hired Terry Francona, which honestly, like, scares me a little bit. Cincinnati Reds played 62 one-run games in 2024, and we're 31-31 in those games. So, like, adding Tito, who I just respect how he manages the game, to a young core over there, man, that's interesting. Like, I would not sleep on the Reds.
No, that's a team to watch, big time.
But yeah, I mean, the last thoughts on the bullpen before we move on. Yeah, similar issues as the rotation. Just 24% strikeout rate for the pen this year for the Cubs, which is, you know, only slightly above average. You know, and they lost a lot of that with 35% strikeout rate for Mark Leiter Jr., you know, who obviously was traded away. The best strikeout rate after that was 31.7. Not as a huge sample size, but Porter Hodge. And, you know, he really needs to tear down that walk rate. Still at like 11, 12%, much too high. He was, you know, he looked really, really good. And his ERA finished the year with a 1.8. And, you know, he's a really good part of this bullpen. But if you look at, you know, the Cubs trading for, you know, Yency Almonte, who didn't like really pan out this year, Hector Neris, who, you know, was thrusted into a role that maybe he probably shouldn't have done. Like, that's probably a, you know, different conversation. You know, Daniel Palencia not being what he was supposed to be. You know, Luke Little, like with all his command issues, you know, only on 17% walk rate. Richard Lovelady, Dick Lovelady, as I'd like to call, you know, trading for you know, pitching Drew Smiley as often as they did, just like using him as a lefty reliever. Like, the final numbers aren't terrible looking. I just, like, every time he came into a close game, I'm like, what are we doing? Like, what is what is this? So yeah,
and a lot of the times you were correct in that assumption.
Yeah,
big time.
It's
you know?
They just need that. They need to add some pieces there. Which, you know, as we said with the one-run games, let's grade the Chicago Cubs 2024 offense. Yeah, this is another one it's tough. You know, I don't want to, like, be so negative. And, you know, I think there's this other Cub publications and podcasts that are doing the same thing. But let's start with the positives. Let's start with the parts of the team. Dansby Swanson, after a rough start, ended up putting together a pretty typical season. Like that, he has 16 home runs, strikeout rate still not what you want to see. Played great defense after he seemed to get a little healthier with his knee. So still getting some pretty good value there. Ian Happ, really, really, really nice season. Continues to be just like a stable force in this offense. 25 bombs, walks pretty well, gives a good at bat. And, even with the health issues, the best player offensively for the Cubs this year was Seiya Suzuki. Defensively, things aside, the bats seem to not have the same lulls. Obviously, we had a oblique injury in there for a bit. But yeah, he put together a pretty nice season. And then, for another positive, I want to point out actually two more. Michael Bush, really, really nice.
Yeah.
Really nice pickup for Jed. As much as people want to, take a dump on Jed, give him his flowers, the Michael Bush trade was a great pickup. As the year went on, his defense at first base improved, and to the point that people are discussing this is a guy that could probably win a Gold Glove at first base. So hopefully we'll see the contact pick up a little bit. The walk rate's pretty solid. It came and went at certain points of the years, but he's first full season in the majors and pretty solid. And really the last month and a half of PCA, that's a huge development, which makes folks interested in that Cody Bellinger opt-in, opt-out, because we don't need a center fielder. Michael Bush could possibly stay in first base, but if Cody Bellinger leaves, you need to replace the theoretical offensive production that you were expecting from him in some capacity. So that is my worry with the opt-out, is what are they going to go get to replace that production? But besides that, they were pretty middling in the offense this year. They weren't terrible. The second half is really where they came to shine. The first half, the runs struggling was well documented. But the second half of the year, they averaged 5.1 runs per game, and they had a team on base percentage of 325 with a 740 OPS and 70 home runs, 106 doubles, all in that second half. The second half, after All-Star break, they were 36 and 27, which really salvages the season. So the second half offense was pretty solid. They're still missing slugs. Yeah. They are one of the lowest,
big time.
One of the lowest home run totals in the majors this year, as a group. And teams that out-hit their opponent, hit more home runs than their opponent win an alarming amount of time. Statistically, it's a significant game changer, and the Cubs just did not, which is probably why the first part of this year, we can talk about the weather at Wrigley or all this other crap that people are talking about.
Don't get me started.
I get it. I saw the numbers too. The ballpark factors for Wrigley this year made it a tough place to play, but we still lost games because there's another team that was also playing in a tough place to play. So it's the people. It's the I'm gonna put it in a different context. It's when Sox fans tell me it's garbage that the Cubs have a home run basket. I'm like, no, it's not garbage because both teams are playing the game. So everyone has a basket. It's not like they teach these guys hey, hit it into the basket. No, everyone has the basket. Everyone has the same advantage. There's no advantage there. Everybody has.
They're just jealous because they couldn't hit it in the basket.
That's true. Exactly.
That's why.
But I think as overall, I'm going to give the offense a C. I think they're an average offense, and a C is an average grade. And they, to be above average, they need a superstar. Juan Soto to really galvanize the group, but it's not going to happen. I get it. I'm not. I want to be very surprised when it happens instead of continuing to get myself excited about how this is the perfect moment, the perfect time.
Yeah,
it's not going to happen.
Wouldn't that be something we could do it right here? Breaking on Bricks Behind the Ivy.
Exactly. No, that's in the Northside Baseball chat. Somebody it kind of shot down. Like I was just talking about Juan Soto in an article idea I had of like just talking about like using all Jed's adages and saying how Juan Soto fits all of those. But like really like the world is exhausted of Juan Soto Cubs discussions because like we're just setting ourselves up for disappointment.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, well, I was like, if the Cubs sign Juan Soto, I will play Go Cubs Go on my electrocello in the snow this winter in my underpants. Like, because, like, that's how unlikely I think it is. But then I also said maybe BBTTI needs to be in OnlyFans if I'm going to be putting that kind of content on the internet.
I don't know. And I agree with you. I agree wholeheartedly with you. I think this season, when it comes to the offense, it's a tale of two seasons. And I agree with you giving them a C because I would have given the first half a D and the second half a B. Granted, they didn't have enough push to get them into the playoffs, but they just fell behind too early in the season for them to have the opportunity to come back. And looking at a lot of the stats, I agree with you. With Michael Busch, Talkman's another guy who had flashes of the pan all season. The Palatine Pounders, they call them. I did like to also see that they started, stealing the bases more. Council seems to be a lot more aggressive when it comes to that. I mean, you had Horner and PCA and those guys trying to manufacture runs, trying to manufacture the excitement to get get in, get home.
Yeah.
And, but like I said, I honestly think though that we are missing the bopper. And again, and I agree with you, we'll do those snow angels in Wrigleyville and Gallagher Way. We are missing a big bopper, and I agree. It's more than likely it's not going to be Soto, but you know what? There are probably some other names, and the playoffs are over. There's going to be more names that come out of the woodwork, and I about fell out of my chair when I heard Jed blaming the weather. And I mean, yes, I understand it. Wrigley Field has always been a hit or miss when it comes to the wind blowing out, blowing in, the swirling, the neighborhood, yada, yada, yada. But at the end of the day, you need big hits. You need big bopper. And we just don't have it. And it doesn't always have to be, the home runs. It doesn't always have to be that. There was some situations where base hit would have scored you 2 and we couldn't get it. There would be situations where you'd have second and third, nobody out, and then we couldn't get a run in. It's even just a little bit, the small ball, if you will. And so, but yeah, I agree with you that I would give them a C. I'd like to thinking optimistically that they are going to go out and get somebody who I don't know. I would like to think also that some of the seasons that these guys had won't be a repetitive thing as far as the slumping's concerned. I think Cody's going to be here next year. I think that, he is going to eventually test the free agent market, but, you might get a few offers here and there, but if you look at the entire book of last year, if you have a season where you're healthy for about 95% of the season and you're hitting better than you did last year, he knows, and so more importantly, Scott Boras knows, that the offers are going to be that much more. So that's why I see him sticking around for another year, being optimistic, but, who knows?
It is feeling like a very, very pivotal offseason.
Yeah.
Jed is on the hot seat. It's a contract year. And really, I think this is a fan base that has gotten very frustrated. I think it's tough because you sit here on one hand and say, like, Cub fans are very loyal. I'm a very loyal Cubs fan. I'm not jumping the ship from this team. I've loved them since I was a small child, and it's going to take a lot for me to go. But, like, yeah, when they're not playing well and you look at the price of tickets and, like, you look at the side of that coin where it just the conversation gets weirdly difficult, and then how the team is operated, they could run like the Yankees or the Dodgers, and they aren't. And yes, we don't have all the information. We don't, but it's hard not to sit here and be like, look at my basement. This is what every dollar of the things that I've bought. Look at your house. Every dollar that is revenue this team has made, and then most of those dollars were spent when they were just god awful, and it was just fun to be a Cubs fan. And now, like, we were promised something more, and we've just never gotten there. And it's weird. It's a weird place to be. But yeah, let's wrap with defense. I think the team took a step back this year early in the season defensively. Dansby Swanson had a lot of errors early in the year. And that was frustrating to look at. And I think that's it's kind of like just this pitching staff relies on defense because they don't have strikeout stuff. So when the defense slips, it becomes very, very obvious, very, very quick that like the defense isn't playing well. And like we had Christopher Morel, aka Juggles the Clown, at third base for a good chunk of the year. Isaac Paredes came here, and he's a better defender than he showed, but he was not great. He just was not great. And then after that, like the outfield defense from Seiya Suzuki, not great. Catching, like not good pop time. Not able to manage a run game, not great. So, these players aren't making up for that offensively, like balance the scale. So it's just the team we're probably going to get potentially another Gold Glove from Dansby Swanson, another for Nico. PCA doesn't have enough reps potentially to really be seriously considered, but he really did rack up a ton of defensive run saves. He was out there, and so there's some really good defensive components, but they just early on they did not play very well defensively, and I think health was likely with Nico and Dansby. Nico seemed to be battling some health stuff most of the season, and Dansby definitely had a knee issue that I'm sure will be addressed in some capacity this offseason. But yeah, I think I'm going to give the defense solid B minus. Because, towards the end of the year, they really solidified. They've got some really good pieces still on this defense. But the defense with the way the pitching is constructed becomes just so important. So, it should probably be closer to a C only because it feels more average, because when you're a team that's putting the ball in play, or a pitching staff that lets the ball get in play so much, then the defense becomes just amplified in its importance.
Yep. And I agree with you. I, on the other hand, would probably give them a solid C. And the only reason why is I understand that players get a case of the yips, and they go through struggles and everything. I mean, I played ball all the way up through college, and I get it. And I see a lot of these players, you go through stretches, and I get it. And it does happen. Okay. But the reason why I would give them a C is because there's a big difference between, going through a struggle or a stretch of games or a stretch of innings or whatever the case is where you got the yips, they call it, versus I started seeing, and especially in the first half, mistakes that were made by teams that I used to coach in Little League here at the Sugar Grove District. I mean, not getting down on ground balls. I mean, I would scream at the kids, down and dirty. And my son's out of Georgia right now, probably shaking his head. Down and dirty. I want to see that glove dirty every game. Fly balls. They're not camping under them as they should and getting ready to crow hop it in. Not hitting the cutoff, man. That's probably one of my biggest pet peeves. And that led to balls going wild left and right and over the catcher and runners advancing to score more or to give more scoring opportunities. I mean, that's probably why I would give them a good solid C, maybe even a little bit lower, just because of the fact of those were things that you should have had in your baseball genetic makeup. That those are Little League mistakes that just cannot happen at this stage in the game. Seiya Suzuki, I mean, I would have had a better chance if you had one of your dogs out there in right field some of the time, and I don't want to get down on him. I mean, he did overall a body work, had a good year, and, and I do love the organization, but They just got to tighten it up. And I don't know if it's more fundamentals. I don't know if it's work in the off season. I don't know if it's, getting to spring training down in Arizona a little early. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's because maybe it was in their head that they were struggling so much at the plate that they were carrying that out into the field, and then it snowballed from there. And again, I mean, those are easy. Those things are easily fixable. And I think that they're going to do it. They just got to get to that point.
Yeah, it's so interesting to say Suzuki too. Like, he won 5 Gold Gloves in Japan, like from 2016 to 2021. Like,
what happened?
It has to be the yips. Like, just because, like, first of all, right field in Wrigley is hard to play. Everyone has known that. The way that the wall curves out there. Yeah, it's a weird position to play. But like, ever since that drop ball in Atlanta, after the whole like pausing the game for the 40-70 season in the middle of like a very important game for the Cubs, and like, I just feel like there has just been this weird like haphazard look on his face of like assuming he's going to screw up instead of assuming he's going to catch it. Maybe that's like I'm projecting onto him of what I'm feeling when I'm watching.
No, if anybody out there has gone to Cubs games and been live at Wrigley Field, and anytime a ball has gone out to right and he's caught it, what's happened? The crowd goes nuts like somebody just hit a homer. Jesus. I mean, I've been at enough games this year where that happened on a consistent basis. That just shows you right there that the faith in his defensive glove is just not there. And how he won 5 Gold Gloves in Japan, and then did he leave it back there? Did he leave his glove back there and had to go buy one at Dick's Sporting Goods? I don't know, but I think it's going to get fixable. It's just a lot of work that just needs to be done. That's all.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely psychological. I don't know how you fix that. Sometimes it just fixes itself, and sometimes it's not fixable. Like John Lester throwing the first base. Like, there's just these things. But like, they found strategies around that. But so before we get the overall grades, this episode is not super long, but it is getting kind of long, which means usually it would be a time for a cup of coffee. And if I'm going to have a cup of coffee, I'm going to be drinking from Yagi Road Roasting Company. Yes, I'm just going to pride myself on these dynamite transitions. Yagi Road was started by 3 college friends at the greatest university on the planet, Valparaiso University. It is a specialty boutique coffee roaster centered around ethically sourcing and meticulously roasting some of the most special coffees in the world. So a lot of life's most special moments happen over coffee, which is why Yagi Road ensures that the coffee in your mug is as special as the moment you are experiencing. So guys, use the link in the description of this podcast and order some coffee from these guys. It's super good coffee. We're working on some exciting things in the future, but need you guys to buy some coffee so like we can validate the existence of our partnership. But check out the link. It's www.yagiroad.com/pixbehindtheivy. Go there, order some coffee. It's crazy good. If you're in the Chicago area, if you're thinking about going apple picking at County Line Orchard, hop on down to downtown Valpo. They have a coffee shop inside of a bookstore across from City Hall, right on Lincoln Way in Valparaiso. Get some coffee. Talk to my guy Walker, one of the founders of Yagi Road. He'll hook you up with some of the best coffee you've ever tasted. So thank you, Yagi Road Roasting, for being a partner. But now that I'm all caffeinated, theoretically, let's talk final grades. I think for me, the biggest issue I have is this season is potentially a failure because they intended to construct this team, moving David Ross off the managerial chair to be a playoff team, and they didn't make the playoffs. So that to me should be a huge, huge factor in putting their grade together. But like the season wasn't as unmitigated of a disaster as Cub fans have represented it. There are positives to take from it. I'm going to give this season and the year a C-, because I don't think they're failing as an organization. I think they've made some mistakes. I think that they're trying to thread the needle and bring guys in here, but I think like to me the vision has gotten blurry, meaning
Yep.
Sean had mentioned this earlier in the season, and like I had not thought about it that way, and I've thought about it that way ever since. You signed Dansby Swanson to this long contract. You signed Ian Happ to a contract that you're comfortable with. You signed Nico Horner to a contract to control his arbitration years, to have these cost controlled just parts of your contract of your team, so that you can control costs, so that you can supplement the roster in different capacity. Each year that we don't make the playoffs on those contracts is a waste of what you think you've bought.
Yeah.
So
that's well put.
This is technically the window. This is the window the Cubs should be winning, because you have put together the roster the way that you think you want it. Seiya Suzuki is another one in there. Like these are pieces that are locked up at numbers that you really, really like. So you should be able to, throw other assets and things like maybe more outside of the box or above market value to like supplement this group. The supplementing doesn't seem to be happening. And like, yes, we're a top tier farm system. Yes, we have 7 top 100 prospects, and like a lot of them are very close to the majors. But like, I think it makes the conversation just more difficult of like where they're going to go because of like what's on the roster. Like, so the vision itself like has just gotten blurry to me, because yes, they spent $230 million, but there's just a lot of wasted dead weight money in there. And like, was that because, ownership was like, hey, like maybe a year ago, they're like, you said this wasn't a rebuild. Like, we got to start winning some baseball games. So they started throwing, like you said, at a dartboard, like, let's get Trey Mancini or Eric Hosmer, like, while we try to figure out the first base thing. But like, those guys are professionals. So they'll, raise the floor of like our roster output over there, instead of like trying to figure out what Frank Schwindel is, and all these other ideas that have just fallen flat in their face that have aggregated into a lot of this like wasted roster money. Like,
hands down. Oh yeah.
And it's just, yeah, like, and then like it's harder to evaluate. Like Drew Smiley, you signed him as rotation depth 3 years ago on a like what would be a reasonable in modern day philosophies rotation deal, but now he's not a rotation arm. He's an extremely expensive and effective bullpen piece. So it's just there's a lot of weird like roster construction, payroll use issues. So $230 million should buy you a great baseball team.
In theory, yeah, absolutely.
The way they're using the money is not effectively doing that. They have a ton of money coming off the books. So, like, that's why, not to get into, like, the Juan Soto thing, God, I got to stop bringing this up. But, like, if you pay him $40 million or $45 million, like, he's probably going to be close to, like, the Shohei Ohtani. But, like, he probably won't, like, I don't know if he'll eclipse it, because Shohei Ohtani is just so different. Like, he's not, but, like, who knows? But, like, for one, time value money, like, we'll do another episode of this, but, like, you do have payroll flexibility and, like, deploying money for the thing that you need. Like, Juan Soto's don't grow on trees. The kid's 25 and he's a Hall of Famer already. Like, so, like, just, like, it doesn't matter what it costs. Like, you just figure it out. Like, that's, like, so to that, this is a C-, because the vision is blurry. The season is not a success because you should be just like lapping the competition in this division because of your resources, and you're not.
Yep. I think they sell that, or they make enough of those beer snakes out in the bleachers that the money that's revenue just from buying that alone should be able to buy Soto. Here's a stat that it always drives me nuts when we talk about going out and signing big contracts and getting players. The Cubs are the 4th most expensive organization in baseball to go see a game for a family.
Yep.
4th. Number 1 on that list is the Yankees. Now, granted, they got that money and everything else like that, but the 4th. So don't sit there and tell me that they don't have the revenue. They're building all around Wrigleyville. They're taking ownership of the rooftops, all of those things. It's like, don't get me started. I'll be on this soapbox for an hour. But how they sit there time and time again and say that they don't have the money. And now you see, what was it, 2 weeks ago, that they were letting go of some coaches and some people within the organization as a cost save. Cost save for what? What are you trying to do here? I don't know. And maybe. And again, I'm trying to be optimistic. That's what life being a Cub fan is all about. But they got to figure this out, and they got to start spending the money. As far as this team this year, you've brought up a word that has been pretty much this entire podcast, and it's average. And that's how this is average. You want to get into playoffs, you got to be above average, period. And, you know, you need to have guys produce. Again, we go back to the yips and we go back to the underperformances of earlier on in the season. But those are excuses. And at the major league level, you just can't have it. The pitching staff, the rotation, great. Bullpen, in my opinion, if you look at the entire body of work, an atrocity. The offense, lackluster. You know, the defense, if you can type that up as a word. But I would sit there and I would say, but I would give it a C, because here's the deal. They had flashes in the pan, and they could have done it. I mean, look at the team. Yeah, we finished in second place. Take a look at the first place team, the one over at One Miller Parkway in Milwaukee. They didn't have a lot of big boppers, but they made it work. And the Cubs can do that if they start coming up and playing to their potential. When You Wish Upon a Star is probably playing in my mind from Disney, but you've got to sit there and you've got to try to figure out how to make this work. And yeah, we do have one of the best minor league organizations right now, the minor league systems, but that always doesn't pan out. How many times have we heard the name Brennan Davis? And this guy is like a crystal chandelier. He constantly, and great ball player. I'm sure he's a really nice guy, but he's unfortunately in that pattern where he's constantly getting hurt. You know, all of the guys that have been coming up, they just don't pan out. And we had to wait a little bit, and hopefully this is now showing that PCA is going to start panning out now. Granted, we acquired him in a trade. He wasn't a homegrown talent, but he was young, and we did get him up here, and he is actually performing. And, you know, it's going to be an interesting offseason. I do think that they have some things. I don't think they need to blow the thing up totally. You're going to need to shore up this pitching staff now, because more than likely, and unfortunately, Hendricks probably won't be here. And, you know, and you already needed a big pitcher, and now you might need a back end guy in case any of the other guys in the minor league systems doesn't pan out. You need that big hitter. But I think we're just a few pieces away. I don't think you need to totally destroy it. That's why I'm giving him a C. And I'm hoping to God next year I'm looking back at this and saying, okay, we definitely did improve and we're in the playoffs.
Yeah, and that's what I'm hoping too. And I think like this is a key season for Bricks Behind the Ivy offseason, and a big key offseason for Jed Hoyer, because this should be a very interesting offseason, because there's a lot of things locked in place, so they're going to have to get creative to address this roster, because it needs to be addressed. Like, it's just like there are very, very specific things that need to happen. So, yeah, I think that's a good place to leave it on a quasi-positive note. Sorry for... but before we go, put in the comments, what do you guys think? What do you think the grades are for starting pitching, relief pitching, offense, defense, and overall? Do you think we're on point? Do you think we're too positive? Do you think we're too negative? Just let us know in the comments. We'll interact with you there. But this has been another episode of Bricks Behind the Ivy. Thank you, Pat, for joining us for this review. We've got
no problem. Here's to you.
Haven't hit that subscribe button, pound that subscribe button. Come back next week. Download the audio. Watch the video, and we'll see you guys next week. And even though they're not playing, go Cubs.
Go Cubbies!